And then came the rebuilding. And then at that time, we had a huge break, which was the commitment that we received from the European Union to support us through this difficult process, which is in many ways counterintuitive. Many donors will have said that it's just not the right moment to be doing this kind of work. Fortunately, the European Union had other ideas that were much closer to the approach that we were trying to develop. And so we started to improve on equipment, we started to improve on training, communications, surveillance, and so on, and gradually took control of the land, the air, and the waters of the national park, and trained our staff to a very, very high level. This is just one example, which is the creation of a canine unit using the very best techniques that are available worldwide. The creation of a bloodhound tracker unit to help us tackle the terrible problem of elephant poaching. These same units are now starting to be used by the police, so there's a collaboration being developed between the rangers and the police to address common crime, and in particular the issue of rape, pillaging, and so on. And so the rangers are beginning to broaden their impact to tackle the fundamental problems of the absence of the rule of law in Eastern Congo. But of course they remain a security force. They remain a force that has to be well armed, well trained, and a number of problems need to be addressed. ICCN, the National Park Authority's rangers, suffer many of the same problems as the National Army. We're not that different, but we have to become a lot better. And so a security sector reform process was initiated about 4 years ago, again with the support of the European Union, to bring numbers right down, to train people up, to give them proper support, proper training, and the ability to safeguard the park, and this new function that was developing, which was to safeguard the population that was passing through the park. And in fact, it's important to say that more rangers have been killed in the last 2 years protecting the local population passing through the park than protecting the wildlife. Those two functions are fundamental to the role of a ranger who has to cover all law enforcement issues in the area that's under their jurisdiction, the national park. But in addition to the security issues, there are a number of other issues that we have to tackle. The issue of oil keeps coming up. And of course, oil is one of our great challenges. Oil is something that we all use, so we can't just be considered anti-oil. It doesn't make sense, but we do have to provide alternatives. And we do need to have a constructive approach to this problem. And the only way to do it is to build viable solutions that can provide a better way forward on the basis of economic development and not just environmental activism. And so what we did is we worked on a number of areas that would dramatically increase the value of the park for the local population. And one of them is tourism, which of course now is a difficult area to support because of our current situation. But I still want to talk about that a little bit, because over 3 years we had a period of relative peace, and something quite incredible happened. We decided to really push tourism in the way Rwanda did in the late 90s. In 2010, Rwanda made $430 million contribution to its GDP through the tourism sector, which is largely dependent on its mountain gorillas. 120,000 full-time jobs now exist in Rwanda as a result of tourism. In Kenya, the country that I know well, I grew up there, my family is Kenyan, we have $3.5 billion contribution to the country's economy as a result of the tourism sector, which is entirely dependent on the national parks. And what we found in those 3 years, between 2009 and 2011, is that we had between 80 and 100% growth year by year in tourism. In 2011, we generated $1 million from tourism. And so we had that same trajectory as Rwanda had in the late 90s. And so there's a real potential there, which of course has been suspended because of the war. But we never had a single incident with our visitors who came to the park. And because of that, we've managed to retain all the assets, the gorillas, the lodge, the infrastructure that we developed, and the trust of the tour operators, because we've been extremely careful. And so when the war ends, and it will end one day, those tour operators will be back the next day. They've told us that, and we'll continue where we left off. And so these assets still exist. There's a wonderful lodge in Virunga. It's a little bit empty at the moment, unfortunately, but the time will come. But there isn't just tourism. Tourism is what people often think about. There are other assets as well, and one of the main ones is water. And here we have Lake Edward, which is managed by the park. There are 40,000 people whose livelihoods are dependent on that lake, which only exists because we regulate fishing on that lake. And that is their future. Another very, very important development, which was referred to by His Excellency the Foreign Minister, electricity. It's a mountainous area. It's very high rainfall. There's this incredible opportunity to turn the forests of Virunga, which are healthy, and so they enable flowing rivers to come from them, and those rivers can be harnessed to generate electricity, and that electricity will create jobs. And those livelihoods are the people who will ensure that that park survives. And so over the past few years, and we're just about to finish it now, again, we were fortunate to get the support of the European Union for that project, but it's a hydroelectric plant that the park has built for the population, which should generate between 5,000 and 10,000 jobs, and the establishment of a new industry. These things are happening now, at the height of the war. These things are possible. Eastern Congo doesn't stand still because there's a war. The Congolese continue to live their lives. They're extremely dynamic. They're extremely hardworking. And these things continue. And that's what we need to work by. Other activities, I talked about the charcoal. The charcoal is a source of revenue for the armed groups. We can fight the armed groups, or we can cut off their source of income. Either way, we stand a good chance of weakening their hold on society. And so we've worked very hard to try and create substitutes to this illegal charcoal that's been producing in the park. And these are biomass and char-dust briquettes that we've been working on for the past few years. And you need a lot of imagination, you need a lot of creativity to drive these new ideas into the population. And this is how we sell the briquettes. We market them, even in the IDP camps, where people desperately need fuel wood. Far better to try and convince them this way that what we call char-dust briquettes are better than illegal charcoal that's generated by the armed groups. And then other programs that are beginning to develop now. You know, a big road project that's been supported by some US foundations. It's not just a road project. You know, Congo needs better roads. It's a project that's been built to work with the Army Corps of Engineers, so that perhaps an approach like that can grow. When the militias decide to stop fighting the army, they'll be integrated into the army. It's a huge problem. It leads to a cycle of wars every 4 years. We get a new war because the militias are integrated into the army can't handle them, and they all start fighting again. So we're testing the idea of not just putting them in the army, but putting them in the non-combatant units in the Army Corps of Engineers, getting them to build roads and build their relationship, restore their relationship with the population by doing something useful. And then all the rest. You know, much of what I've talked about generates income, and through that we're able to do more for the community. You know, the oil industry has come. They started in 2007, and they said that they would change everybody's lives 5 years ago. Over that period, we've built 9 schools for the population, 2 health centers. We built fresh water systems, des adductions d'eau. And then this project that really summed it all up for us a couple of months ago. We were able to re-establish the water system in Goma after the Battle of Goma, when the FARDC, the National Army, cut the power lines as they were fleeing the town, and created a situation where 1 million people, including some very vulnerable, internally displaced people, were suddenly without water. It doesn't sound like much, but that means cholera, it means other waterborne diseases. In 1996, a very similar situation created a situation where 2,000 people a day were dying as a result of waterborne diseases. And so the park was able to intervene on that through its supporters, and in 36 hours, with its team of technicians that had developed a megawatt of electricity in diesel generators to get the pumping stations working again and pump the water back into the community. And so all of these are the outcome of a robust state institution that has realized its role as a service provider for the community. And of course, it's not there just for the wildlife, it's not there just for the animals, it's there as a major pillar of the economy in an effort to rebuild Eastern Congo, and an effort that continues irrespective of the political situation of the moment. And of course, all of that is based on one thing, which is the dedication and the passion of a small group of Congolese rangers who are in many ways as rare and as special as the mountain gorillas themselves. And all of it essentially comes down to them. Thank you very much.